In the old days, people like the Buddha or Ananda or Sariputta or anybody would go off into a remote place, into a cave, the foot of a tree, a forest, a room. A stupa which is hollow, which people can actually sit inside and meditate, is the modern equivalent.
While Vipassana is the absolute simplest thing in the world to do, if you're looking at the mind, just sitting down and being quiet and you're observing the body, and you start to understand that in observing the body, you're simply observing the processes of the mind in a non-analytical way. It suddenly is an extremely hard thing to do, and it's so simple. And this is the thing that so many of us are trying to avoid by always doing, but never confronting who we are inside.
Big meditation halls were the way things went for a very, very long time. And then when we established Dhamma in Massachusetts, we sat in a tent. It was like very, very hot and uncomfortable in some ways, but that was also part of the practice, and you don't complain about it and just experience it. But then finally the pagoda was built. I just felt a huge difference in terms of privacy. Being able to have my own storms in privacy felt much better to me. When I would go to my cell, I would feel, I'm home.
In the long courses at Dhamma, when they assigned you a cell, it was always at the lower level, and then Goenkaji would call people up to the upper cells from time to time, and you would sit there with him and he would check you. You would get a little chit of paper that would say, like this morning after breakfast, go to cell number 4 or cell number 3 or something. And you go and sit there, and now you have, just 8 people gathered together around the central cell. And then he would come and enter the cell, say at 8 o'clock in the morning for a group sitting, and he would come to the center cell and you could hear it. He would sit down and just begin to meditate. Well, there you are. It's as if you're sitting right in front of your teacher. So obviously your incentive to work very seriously is increased. And at the end of the sitting, you didn't get up and go out. He would just keep you there, relax a little bit. And then he would start opening the doors, and you could hear them opening. Your door is coming soon, And as you opened it, he'd be sitting there in front of you. You're just face to face and meditating, and he'd meditate for a little while, and then he'd start asking questions, about what are you experiencing, and you'd answer. And eventually he would give instructions for how to work. That intensity of practice and, again, the location just somehow took all the ego out of you. You just couldn't walk around normally for a little while. It would take some time to sort of calm down from that. But sometimes it just was what you needed to sort of push you over a little ledge or a little hump or something, and practice would go so much deeper.
Sometimes I remember one time he came and I was so focused, I didn't want to be disturbed. So I didn't look, I didn't say anything. He didn't say anything. He just stood there for some time. It felt like really gentle, warm shower, sort of, pleasant sensations and quietness. And then he just closed the door and walked off. Another time I was like, Mahadukkha. Okay, continue.
This is extremely hard work, and it's not for the faint-hearted. This message will fall on ears that are receptive to hear it. It won't fall on everyone's ears. This is not a mass movement. Buddha didn't teach a utopia. But those who are prepared to withstand the rigors of what an introspective practice means, and with their own experience understand that the effort that they're putting in has a reward, it has immediate reward, they'll make that effort.
I feel sort of like I have been thrown into a stream that's just like flowing. And there's nothing that I can do to stop that flow. But that has aided me so much, knowing that I'm just in this stream. And I'm quite confident that I'm going to keep marching on the path.
You know, Goenkaji said to me, I remember it really clearly, talking to him, I said something, I was having a storm myself during a long course. I said, the only thing I got left, Goenkaji, is I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, and you as my teacher. And he said, that's the base. And then I kept hearing all this stuff he was talking about the base, this gratitude, this faith, this confidence. And I think development of that base has been everything in my life.
Sitting in a cell is an extraordinary experience. Lots of people don't even want to do it. And after all, who wants to, you know, when you sit in a cell, you're sitting with yourself. And most of our effort is to get away from ourselves, to distract ourselves in some way or another. And it's always a little scary to do that, to sit down and say, okay, can I really do this, or will I be bouncing off the walls?
My first experience sitting in a meditation cell, I did not like it. I think my mind just couldn't really focus on my breath or sensations. My mind just wandered around the room. So it took me about a year from that point to go back into a cell and to really appreciate it.
There's a chance when you're in a cell sort of to sink into yourself. I mean, we see this reality, this composed reality of ourselves, and we know that we're only seeing the surface. You know, even if we have some feelings inside, we know that it's a very superficial impression that we have. But in meditation, there is really the possibility of penetrating that to see an entirely different reality. In a cell, that's much easier to do.
There's an irony to cells. The irony is you're much more alone for sure. That's the meaning, that's the value. At the same time, the cells, the way we have gotten them in our tradition, from Burma, from Goenkaji, from Dhammagiri, are a very specific kind of isolation. You're completely isolated, you can't see anybody, but you're sitting in a building with 100 of your friends. So you're not connected visually, you're not connected physically, you're not connected in any way that our normal senses have, but you feel connected. The circular construction of cells where you're facing other people and not contacting them is a remarkably creative psychological invention in which you feel alone together.
When I first went to the Massachusetts Center to take a 10-day course there, I met the principal teacher there, Barry Lapping. At that time, the pagoda had just been finished, the rough shell. And he said to me, one day you're going to help us finish this pagoda. And at that time, my knowledge of Asian pagoda was extremely limited. And I don't really consider myself to be a designer. I'm more of a counterfeiter. You know, I can go out and look at stuff and copy it or see how to improve upon it. So I explained this to them, and I said, you know, I would love to be involved, but I suggested to them that it would be worth it if I went to Asia to spend some time studying the pagodas there. But I found with these pagodas, the more I looked at them, the more lost I became. Like, you know, how did they do this? For me, the way I found what is essentially the Buddha's teaching is because I had exhausted all other possibilities known to mankind for dealing with depression. By the time I had arrived at this meditation center, which was the Vipassana Meditation Center in Massachusetts, I was a complete mess. And I went into the office and there was a woman there. She said, well, you know, we don't really treat depression, but many people have found benefits, you know, from taking these courses, and maybe it could help you. So I thought, okay, you know, what's this going to cost me? I just left a place 2 hours ago and that was going to be $100,000 or $200,000. What's this one going to cost? And she said, oh, there's no charge. It was at that instant that I realized maybe, even though this place is telling me they don't cure depression or anything, maybe this is where I belong. It really has made a very significant difference in my life. My life is serving these centers and in the construction arena, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity.
Years ago, when I first started serving, I was in Massachusetts. That center was brand new, and Goenkaji was coming every year for courses, and the whole question of the development of a center arose. It's the first time I'd ever thought about it, obviously. And as I worked on that, I became more and more aware of designs of pagodas from India, obviously, and the effect that that might have on people who were unfamiliar with the Buddha, with his teachings, with our tradition in New England, the northeast part of the United States. And it worried me. I felt like, well, there's great value in sitting in cells, but why have this imported foreign architecture? We say we're non-sectarian. All the questions that students still have. I had the opportunity in those years to talk to Goenkaji a lot. I raised these questions and I kept coming to him with pictures from books of round buildings in New England even, and say, look, you know, we could build something like this. It would fit right in the landscape. He listened. He kind of smiled indulgently. I could tell he wasn't convinced. And in the end, he always said, don't worry about it. You think there's going to be controversy. You think people will object. They won't. Their objections will go away immediately when they see these beautiful pagodas. Just leave it aside, you know. And as we went forward, even in Massachusetts, when we first got around to building the cell complex, we just built a square building and put off for the distant future the question of what would happen up on top there. We called it the pagoda. And yes, it had cells in a radial sort of circular design inside, but there was nothing up there for many, many years. We tried to put some extra structural support in the center of that building, great big heavy foundations and steel posts that went all the way up to the roof because we knew something big and heavy was going to have to go up there sometime. And the only way we knew to build pagodas at that point was these massive masonry structures like they were building in India, very highly labor intensive, lots of skilled work to make all the fine crenellation and whatnot. But we didn't cross that bridge because didn't know how. And honestly, in my mind, for many years, I had some doubts about whether or not that was the right way to go outside of Asian countries. But my mind changed eventually.
So the old idea with this structure was, you get someone like a Buddha or a major disciple like Sariputta or Moggallana, any of these people, and you put the relics in a casket, in a box of some kind, and then you built a very solid structure around it. And we've all seen these major brick or even earth structures, and people can sit around it, facing it, and get the benefit of that vibration. And that was the tradition for a very long time, and still is. Sayagyi's innovation was to say, all right, well, we can also have a stupa which is hollow, which people can actually sit inside, and then they can be just with themselves, with their own vibration, and then they can sit undisturbed within this structure. And that's very helpful for meditation. Group sittings are wonderful. If your meditation is a little bit weak, you can get support from all the others around you, or if your meditation is strong, you can share and support the others around you. But sooner or later, everybody needs to be able to work on their own, just as the Buddha went off and worked on his own, just as so many do. You have to work with your own impurities without any disturbance at all. And this structure where you've got individual cells is perfect for that.
Sometimes there's been times where I haven't been able to handle being in the cell. I've had to leave the cell and go sit in the Dhamma hall for support.
This is a long process. It's the most difficult skill a human being can learn. This is such an elusive and subtle ability to observe oneself and learn these subtle abilities to perceive and how to be less reactive. We're hardwired to be reactive. We're hardwired to be distracted and not look inside.
As an assistant teacher, I'm constantly giving advice to students. You should do this and you should do that. And these days, almost every time it happens when I sit a course, I finally realize I should be taking my own advice. And I'm not. One of the things I often tell meditators is you need to back up, work in a more relaxed way, don't push yourselves so hard, and don't make a fetish out of sitting without moving. If you need to move, just go ahead and move and carry on. Keep on going. That's what matters, And what's important is what happens in the mind, ultimately. The physical posture is just an aid for that. I guess as I have had some courses where I felt I did go a little bit more deeply, I saw that it isn't the length time that I'm sitting. It's working to sit, in that relaxed way, but being rigorous about keeping my attention within the body on breath or sensations, nothing else. And it works. It works.
When we were in Burma in 1988, it was one time when we were sitting with Ukole in his office. We were talking about the interesting innovation of building meditation cells beneath pagodas, that style, the Uba-Ken style of pagoda that we know Goenkaji copied when he came to India. That Ukole said, well, Uba-Ken knew the works of the Archaeological Survey of India. The Archaeological Survey of India was a colonial effort to basically understand all the ruins that they kept finding in different parts of India. And they printed some beautiful big books with photographs. Sanchi is documented in there very well, and many other places. And I remember in that discussion, Ukole said, he really admired Johnson and Laura, the cell structures that were in those caves, and he was aware of Bairat, which was this pre-Ashokan pagoda near Jaipur, where all that's left is some foundations that have been excavated in India there. But it shows that this was a stupa of a different type than we've seen in most places, because it had walls and small rooms of one kind or another. And that seems to have been the inspiration for building that Uba-Ken built in Rangoon. As the pagoda kept growing, as the numbers kept growing at the courses of the year, more and more rings of cells were built until there was this huge expansion with a little 8-cell pagoda at the top. It was very much dwarfed by the later development that the pagoda and Goenka decided at one point to add a second story upstairs. Inside of that, at the center of that now, was the original Buckingham style pagoda, but over top of that, a much larger pagoda was built, 60-foot diameter base, and it was in the style of the Shwedagon pagoda from Yangon. But as that construction work was being completed, Goenka started saying, okay, look, it's time to start meditation. Let's get some vibration going in this new structure. So go upstairs, start sitting, just choosing yourself, start sitting. So we would do that in groups of sitting. I remember going there the first time and expecting that it would be hard, that it would be a tough place to sit because it was just still so raw. You still smell the cement curing. But you know, half a dozen of us up there. I sit in. I remember coming out and walking down after the sittings, and we looked at each other like, what did you feel? What did you experience? Can you believe the strength of vibration there? We were all kind of shaking from the experience of how vibrant it was. And in a situation where we didn't expect that at all. We expected it to be very raw, and it was not that. Even though construction is still underway. And I just began to think of pagodas in a different way. It always said we have these pagodas because they're beautiful, they're inspiring to look at, and they are a reminder of an expression of gratitude to say you can, to the Burmese, to the Sangha who maintains this for us and allowed us to have access to this teaching. So that explanation had been Goenka's rationale for a long time for having these pagoda structures. But after sitting under that large dome of the Shwedagon style pagoda, it felt to me more like this thing is some sort of antenna. I don't know what it is, conducting some kind of electricity or just a vibratory environment is created under this thing that is different than sitting anywhere else. So to me, the concept of meditating in a pagoda like this, it's just alive. I can feel it. It's palpable. I know that must sound strange to some people. It's a little too, but you got to experience it to know what I'm talking about. And I think that's the best reason that I know. Hard to talk about. The best reason I know to build these pagodas here in our centers in the West, where the centers are developed to build them and take advantage of them.
This pagoda became very difficult, you know. Once we are on the plateau, some structure was there. Then we cannot go further because another cell has to be little lower. Another cell little lower. So we had to cut the rock. Every time a ring was added, the rock was cut. So this happened like this. Slowly progress was made.
Well, which is correct? Is it pagoda? Is it stupa? Is it zaidi? What is it? Actually, in Pali, there was the word thupa, and this word actually means heap or pile. That's all. Heap or pile, thupa. In Sanskrit, this is stupa. The Buddha, when he passed on, certain relics were collected. These were all placed into a funerary mound, just a big earthen mound. This mound was called in Pali Datu Gaba. Datu is relics, and Gaba is a cave or a cavity or a womb. And as words travel around the world, the sounds are a little bit different. And in Sri Lanka, Datu Gaba became Dagaba. And this word probably was corrupted by the Portuguese into pagoda. So you have Dagaba and pagoda. Then the third one is Zaidi. Throughout Asia, different countries have different words for these forms. In Pali, it's Chetya. Tibet is Chorten. Thailand, Chedi. In Burma, Zaidi. All similar sound. They all have the same root.
In Burma particularly, there's an elaborate symbology that's built up around all of the aspects of the form of the Burmese zaidi or pagoda shape. It's all based on the very central part of the form where there's a simple dome. Now, in the Burmese elaboration of this, that little round dome looks rather small compared to the huge base it sits on and the very large spire that rises up from it. But that's the original stupa shape. So they've taken this upside down alms bowl, as it's called, this little round mound, and set it on an elaborate base, which is symbolic of the world at large. And then beyond that, the symbology is all about the stages of development, higher development, up to full enlightenment, which is the gem at the top. And it can be interesting and inspiring to someone who wants to understand all that. But I think people can make use of these pagodas and admire them and be inspired by them, whether they know that or not.
In my opinion, the importance of having pagodas in the West is to give practitioners a place where they can practice meditation technique. So the question then becomes, well, okay, why don't we just build these square boxes and fill them with meditation cells? Architecturally speaking, what is occurring in these structures is something extremely special, and it should be a special place. Whether we're conscious of it or not, we're all affected by buildings. And whether you like it or not, you're going to know that you're entering a very special place. And many people, you can see this in people. You can see them as they come nearer to a special building. We're trying to bring people to a more introverted place. No bright lights. You're already starting to get into this meditative mode. Everything is slowing down. Being in this industry, perhaps I'm a little bit more consciously aware of these than the ordinary person, but everybody is affected by this. It was one of the most interesting design processes that I've ever been through, because everybody on the committee was like, oh my gosh, we can't have that. That's too Asian. It's gonna freak people out, or, we can't have that. So we spent many months. We decided, okay, we'll take a more Western approach. And then we had some Western architects submit designs. So we went through this very lengthy process. And at that time, we were probably meeting twice a week. So we would evaluate these designs and, oh, okay, we have this, and in Burma, they would treat this like this. And okay, so we'll use that little bit of detail from Burma, and well, this looks a little too Western. Let's introduce a little more Burmese architecture here. And after 6 or 8 months, what we came back to, we had gone full circle to the full Burmese design. What's difficult for people in the West is to really understand a lot of the Asian architecture. It's very foreign to us. We're familiar with the English, we're familiar with the Greeks, we're familiar with the Romans, but Asian architecture is very alien to us. But the more that they learned about it, they came full circle, just as I had done also. And so here it is, we went off on this Western tangent and came full circle back to the Burmese style.
When we aspired to put a zaidi on the top, and we realized that we couldn't do it financially, and we couldn't do it even physically the way India did in stone, we'd have to have an alternative material. In other words, a foundation to hold a stone structure on the roof would have been enormously expensive. So to crack that difficulty of cost, Jim and his team there discover a fiberglass method that is so authentic. Burmese from the ground here will not be able to tell, no one will be able to tell that that's not a stone zaidi. It's that genuine looking. So here we wanted to make sure that any Burmese who looks at this is going to be as awed as everyone else is educated eye to realize that this is extremely authentic. And when you have the technology of computer-assisted design, like Jim and his team were able to take all of the details of the cuts of Shwedagon-style architecture, these very intricate angles, because it's a rare thing to be able to build in such detailed precision structure that you're trying to model. So we figure if we're doing this for the Burmese and for the general, obviously old student population, we ought to do it right. And they've done it right. When we got the first piece up there, we got a little sprinkle. And here we are, having gotten the last piece up there, and it's raining like crazy. Yes. After a 4-year drought, it's a bit auspicious to have the timeliness of this rain, shall we say. Not only did we crack an issue of not having to build in stone and all the heavy weight, but we also cracked the economic issue. We can build these pagodas now for a fraction of the cost of what stone or masonry would have cost. And the fiberglass, the technology, all the effort that's gone in to create this has been very minimal. We haven't spent a great deal of money at all compared to the cost of the building of the 128 cells. The pagodas on the top are going to be not insignificant, but no more expensive and no more than a conventional roof system.
When I first saw the drawings, I was a little taken aback. It struck me as, you know, very ornamental. I'd been told that it was a way of showing our gratitude to Burma, and I remember thinking at the time, there must be better ways of showing than spending dana and all this gold. It felt very bling to me and not necessarily going to help anybody with their practice. I also remember thinking that, you know, for most people, it would be more likely to turn them off than to bring them into the practice, because it was so foreign and so alien, and it was such a bold architectural statement. And I remember being quite disappointed that Dhamma in North America had suddenly started, you know, charging in that direction. And we were in Mumbai in 2010, and we wanted to go and visit the Global Pagoda. And we got up before dawn, and, you know, getting the train through Mumbai at that hour of the morning with people doing their morning ablutions on the tracks, and by the time we got off the train, we were feeling quite subdued, and the sun started to come up, and the air was really thick with pollution, but all of a sudden, through the mist, this golden shape just started to appear. It was quite ethereal to see it, and I don't know what it was, this feeling of reverence toward a shape and a form. And I can't explain it to this day. The building and the devotion it inspires in old students, that's one part of it. But really, it's the work that's going to happen in those cells. And people sitting alone and facing their own impurities and leaving course after course after course after course with their load that little bit lighter, and how they inspire the people around them to come. Really, that's going to be the benefit of this building.
I was a cashier at a grocery store, and a customer came in through the line, and his face was really luminous in a way. It was literally luminous. I could see something in him, and the way he carried himself and his manners and everything. And he mentioned Vipassana. Sometimes you have a tendency to open your eyes, and with the darkness there, when you open your eyes, there's nothing to look at. It's just like when you close your eyes. So, I mean, as far as that goes, it's like, that cell is great. I'm extremely grateful for having obtained Vipassana in this life.
A friend mentioned to me, Vipassana, in Mandarin, it's called 内观. Then this word popped up. Then I was thinking, oh, maybe I should try that. Now my ego is still big, but before Vipassana, my ego was huge. Yeah, most important of all, that I started to feel real happiness from inside. It's something I have never experienced before.
So we had these very fancy architects in Yangon, and we had Tet, you know, out in the country, you know, and everybody loved his design. So we worked a little bit out of his home for a while, working on these designs. Every day I would go and pick up his designs and evaluate them. And it was very fascinating because he's doing this amazing work, and here he is living in this, you know, little bamboo structure, him and his family. You know, when we really made a commitment to him, we couldn't use paper and pencil. It's just too difficult to communicate in the US architecturally with pencil and paper drawings. Now it all needs to be on AutoCAD. So then we started working with additional architects in Yangon to complete some of the design work and to prepare the construction drawings. And they were all working in AutoCAD and 3D modeling.
ဒီဖျားစေးဒီနဲ့ပေါ့နော်ဒီဟာကိုစိတ်ဝင်စားဥပဒေခံစားရတယ်တဲ့နောက်ရှင်းနေပေါ့ဟိုဝမ်းသာတယ်ပေါ့စိတ်ကျဉ်းနေမှုရှိတယ်ပေါ့နိုင်ငံသားတယောက်ကဒီလိုစိတ်ဝင်စားသွားတယ်ကျွန်တော်တို့ဒီကိုလာပြီးအလုပ်ခိုင်းတယ်ပို့ပြီးတော့ကျွန်တော်စိတ်ဟောဖြစ်တာပေါ့ဝမ်းသာတာပေါ့
This drawing that he did, I'm just amazed. I mean, now
how about you?
I want to build this.
1 year?
Yeah, me 1 year.
First, I'm working at the bank as a teller. I worked for 2 years to saving the money to buy a computer. After I have enough money to buy a computer, I quit from the bank. Actually, what I'm interested in is 3D. Some of my friends, they teach me, and then I learn from the books. That time, there is no internet, so we cannot learn from the internet. And within this 3 months, there's another my friend called, he is an architect, and he called to me, can you do me some unusual 3D works like the banana or some kind of shape like that? It's difficult to do with AutoCAD. So, and yes, I can do it very well. And then when I stopped seeing Jim, I see him, he is very seriously working on his laptop. He just wait. So I feel more afraid of him. And then he started interviewing me just on the sofa. And then he told me, okay, start working in this evening. I'm still afraid of him. His face is like the red, very serious working like that. So I'm afraid of him more and more. Till 1 week, I'm afraid of him, 1 week. After I know him well, I know about his mind well, I'm not so afraid of him. When I'm doing for the Pagoda project, I'm more stable than I'm doing before. More calm down. Sometimes our work is not finished on time. We sleep at the hotel. Sometimes we sleep on the cushion, some on the floor, like we sleep. And that time I just realized that he is still working at the night gym. I'm very amazed. Everybody is sleeping and he's still working. Like that, he sleep about 3 hours in a day. He's the one that with a very working hard gym.
This entire process really involves 3 distinct steps. The first step is to create a positive of what we want to make. Most of the work that we're doing, the positives are made from cement. And the positive will actually be what you want the final piece to look like.
เ
It's the positive that you have to spend the most time on. Probably 60 or 70% of the work is the positive. If the positive is not correct, if the positive is not true, or the positive contains defects, all of those problems will eventually show up in the final casting. Once the positive is made, then you have to make the mold. After they get everything set up on the positive, then they're going to do a layup, a fiberglass layup. Then they'll go ahead and on the backside of this casting mold is a lot of steel, because here again, we need this mold to stay true. If this mold moves, it's going to show up in all the castings. When we go to put this octagon together, we're not going to have the right angles, and therefore it's not going to come together properly. The casting is really the easy part. Once you have the positive and then you have the mold, casting is easy.
Mostly I am management in this project, also taking care of labor, and I started to work in this project 2007. When I hear that, I'm so glad. Take cleaning also I do. What can I do? I do everything for this project, yeah.
During the whole process, there are people that have come and gone, and I think a lot of times people have this idea, well, if I leave, they'll have to close the factory if I leave, and of course that's not true, but if Tinsar left, we might have to close the factory. She just keeps things organized, keeps everybody in line. She's certainly my main translator, so pretty important role, but her job is probably the most difficult one.
The biggest moment in our life, the monks demonstration. Because this is one thing that we have to move to Thailand. I just went, oh, what kind of sound is this? And Jane wants, he said, okay, let's go out the hall and look in. That time, full of the monks and so many crowded people. A lot of monks, I mean, we are just stand, And then next 3 days, still Myanmar situation is very worse. All shops are closed. The town is very quiet. Yangon is not a lot of people are going outside. Yeah. So we think the gym must go back to Thailand. About 3 weeks, Jane called us to Thailand because we cannot work in Yangon anymore because the government not allow the foreigner to give the visa. So Jim cannot come back to Myanmar. In Thailand, you were seeing the same decorative work, like the flowers or so many things, lotus trees. These were we made in the Yangon. We take these back through the Thai-Myanmar border. It's very excited for me because yes, there's the Kayin River and then the Myanmar army. There's a war at the border. We are very lucky that after we go back from the border, first we take the things to the Myanmar border and we cross the border by the bridge. And in Thailand, we met with the gyms and we gave all our fiberglass and positive to the gyms. And when we go back, After the next day, they have a gunshot fighting a lot. That's only one day. If we are late, we were in a gunshot chaos.
ခန္ဓာကိုယ်မှာပင်ပန်းနှွမ်းတဲ့မှုဆိုတဲ့ဟာကိုစိတ်ကဘယ်လိုပြောမလဲဒီပင်ပန်းတယ်လို့စိတ်မရှိဘူးနဲ့ဒီတရားဘက်ကိုအာယုံပြုတ်ပြီးတော့လှုပ်ဆောင်နေတဲ့အတွက်ကြောင့်မို့ခန္ဓာကိုယ်မှာလည်းအမြဲတမ်းရှိရတယ်ဒီဟာကိုဆင်ញင်မိပြီးတော့လေဒီအကျိုးတွေရတာပေါ့ခန္ဓာကိုယ်ညောင်းညကြိုက်ခဲတဲ့အနေဝေဒနာတို့ဘာလို့အနေပြီးဒါမခံစားဘူးပေါ့စိတ်ထဲမှာမခံစားဘူး
In the 60s and 70s, everything went up for grabs. I was part of that generation. So we questioned everything, questioned authority, right? Don't believe anybody over 30. They couldn't possibly know anything. And religion was part of that. I spent a number of years after that searching for what really is the truth, and that's why I was majoring in religion in college. I was looking for some answers. My first course was in California in 1981, and I heard about it from Gare. I knew her from college, and she was one of these people who kept traveling around and meeting various teachers, trying everything that was being offered in those days. She wrote me and said, okay, forget all that stuff I've talked about before. I just sat with s.n.goenka and I've discovered this is the real thing. I'm dropping everything else. This is really the teacher for me and the practice for me. So I was a little skeptical, but I thought, well, okay, if she says so, maybe I ought to try this out. Day 5 evening.
Why these sensations? What is the cause?
Goenkaji talks about these 12 links of the mind moments arising and how we react at the point of sensations and form our sankharas, all our stress and conditioning. And I had done enough reading of the Buddha's teaching in translations, obviously, in the past that I recognized that very clearly. I had been a religion major in college, and I had never understood it when I had read it before. In his discourse, it became so clear, and I thought, man, this is really something. Not only is he teaching this, but I'm practicing it, and now I get what he's talking about. This wave of just joy and amazement arose in me, and I had to observe that. Piti arose. My reading about Buddhism and about the Buddha, I thought, well, this is very interesting, but how could anybody do it? This is for monks. I can't be a monk, you know? I knew I didn't have the capacity to leave the household and have a celibate life and all that stuff. So I just thought, well, fascinating, but not doable, so not really that important. That was the moment at which I realized not only doable, but there is a vast possibility of, further understanding here. So I was sold right there. For me, it's just completely transformed my life, as it can for anyone who really practices.
Okay, T-Da. T is umbrella. Da is sacred or royal. Sacred umbrella, right? So right now, we're at what I call T-Da Central. Typically, these will hold up for 5 years or 10 years, and I prefer to see something that's going to last for 50 or 100 years. The second possibility is stainless steel, red oxide, sisay.
If you put outside.
If I put outside, which one is going to be better?
Nice to meet you again, Mr. Chen. Yeah, I'm happy to know. So now your desired location is we can do. We will provide actual there.
Just given the unusual nature of these buildings, plan checkers look at these and they're like, you know, they've never seen anything like it. They don't even know how to plan check it. And, you know, there is a natural resistance to anything foreign. In the case of the California project, it took us a year and a half before we finally got all of our approvals from the different jurisdictions. That was the longest I've ever spent on acquiring a permit. These plan checkers, they're all familiar with basic floor plans. Here, we're introducing a floor plan that they've never seen anything like it before. You know, these building departments who are reviewing these, how do you explain to them you're putting up a building and you're going to build 150 closets and people are going to sit in these closets? You know, this is just very unfamiliar to them. So the immediate reaction is, oh, you can't do that. And we explained as far as the individual meditation cells go, they were just like, you know, at a university where you have these individual music rooms for, you know, students to practice, or individual carols for students to study. Same thing. We knew that technically speaking, what we had come up with was acceptable in terms of the code. A lot of this was just emotional reaction to something very foreign to them. And they really fought us. They gave us a very difficult time. And the problem that we were finding was we were writing our responses out to them, getting support for it in the building codes. We suddenly realized after a year, you know, they're not even reading this. You know, they're just reacting. So what we ended up doing in the California project was we put together a video. In early 2009, the California Meditation Center plans to begin construction of a pagoda, which will be the first of its kind in the U.S. Those wishing to take courses are carefully screened by management. Students just learning the technique are limited to study only in the meditation hall, where instruction and practice are given in a group format. Only after students become proficient in the technique are they permitted to use the pagoda. Activities within the pagoda are limited and safe. Students enter their assigned carol, listen to instructions over a public address system, and for the next hour practice what has been taught. Occupants need travel no more than 73 feet to reach the exterior of the building. The building is still completely evacuated in under 45 seconds. And, you know, after 15 months of arguing with them, we sat down, we showed them the video, and they said, okay.
1, 2, 3. Okay. We have to slide this over, and this is in the way.
This is the final sheet of the section. This came from Burma just yesterday, actually, and this is what we're working to. We got 2 4s, a bunch of 2 4s, a lot of them, and 6 6s. The plan it seems to indicate as they're going to follow that angle. There's nothing following them.
No, that's a right angle right there.
Yeah, there's no. So
you just butt into that.
I've been involved in construction for 40 plus years, and the people
that you work with at the meditation center have done a lot of inner work, and this inner work is through meditation. And so you're working with people that are really fun to work with. We connect, we connect really well, and the energy that we get from one another just kind of propels this wonderful feeling. And so it just keeps you going. Sometimes we get a little bit too enthusiastic and we want to put a lot of input out, and everyone has lots of ideas, but in the end, it's the best idea that wins. No one is any stronger than anyone else.
I was new to Dhamma, and I just felt it was more for show. I didn't understand what I understand now, in that we are bringing people to Dhamma. So it is for show, but that's the least of it. The important thing is getting people to understand that we're meditating to get rid of our impurities and bring joy to our lives. It's why I'm here. It's why I keep coming back. It's why I'm helping build the pagoda. It's changed my life completely, meditation, and I want other people to have that opportunity.
This one's almost lined up. We may not need them on this. You're outside the rim of it. There's something wrong. Something isn't right. We're outside the rim.
The pagodas may turn out to be a kind of unifying symbol among the tradition of Vipassana as it's come down through this lineage of teachers. We'll see. My experience of the intensified efficacy of the practice in the cell structures with the pagodas, if other people feel that as well, then I think they probably will survive and spread more. But this is something time will tell.
Yesterday morning, I got an email from my neighbor across the road from me, and he was asking me, he says, "Hey Bob, I saw a gold pagoda that just was erected over on the mountain. What's that all about?" Shining in the sun too. So I told Bob that I'm the unofficial mayor in North Fork. Of course I know what's going on here in North Fork. And that is the California Vipassana Center new pagoda that they've been working on for, I guess, several months. But there it is out there, and it's gold in the middle of all these green trees, but it's a beautiful pagoda. It's unusual.